Hello, and welcome back to Information Storage and Retrieval. It's been a minute, so let's ease back in with the discussion of where we have been. So, in recent talk of information retrieval systems that we've had, we talked about how to rank results that finally come in, right? We're trying to understand what's a good way to take this grab bag of results that have been filtered down by our Boolean search and to sort them in a way that makes them relevant to the user, right? So the way that we focused on doing that before was by way of similarity. So how far away is a given document's sort of structure from the query terms in terms of the features of the text involved, right? TF-IDF is about how strong is the fit for the query's terms, so the overlap of TF-IDF scores. Metadata, so how hierarchically ranked does the text in the title versus the text in the body or abstract, how do we rank those? We even went with cosine similarity, that more sort of mathematical way of understanding how close together two bodies of text are in terms of their TF-IDF makeup, right? Their numerical closeness. And that's all good. This is all useful when you're going to rank, like, okay, I'm trying to find the thing that matches most closely, trying to find the thing that connects the user to the search results fastest and best. But what we haven't talked about yet, this is all sort of internal to the documents and the queries themselves. There's also a lot of external information available, even though it's kind of nebulous. So the idea of what we're going to focus on here is talking about how can we use the interconnected nature of the web to sort of understand, filter, and rank a page in terms of its popularity, usefulness, its general relevance, all that kind of stuff, having nothing to do with a specific query or term. So the idea is, how can we rank the web, right? Which results in general, independent of the specific content, is the most relevant, right? So again, content can address this. The content of the document compared to the content of the query, those all are great. That's very important to understand. But we can talk about this sort of popularity concept or the interconnectedness of a given page to other pages. So if you think about the internet, it's almost entirely these linked pages. And we can use the structure of the way pages are linked up to each other to figure out, what's linked most, which good things link to other good things, which bad things link to other bad things, or vice versa. So this is where we come across the concept of PageRank. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about some other things. So first, a prompt. So why do we call the internet the World Wide Web? We use the word web, right? Think about a spider web. The reason that we think of it this way is that what's in a web, right? A web has lots of little threads, and it has these interconnection points, these points of structure, these little vertexes, right? Well, if we think about web pages in the internet, it's very similar. It's a bunch of points floating in this, this sort of ethereal space, and they're all connected. There are connections between all of the pages in a similar shape, at least, to the way we think of a web, right? So that is sort of the nature of the internet, right? The way we get anywhere is we click on links and we look at a page. Click on links, look at a page, right? Sometimes it's a little more complex than that. You might be using a web app or something nice like that. But that's the general idea, right? So this is how we conceive of the internet in its like broad interconnected form. So what can we do with that information? It's still pretty broad. It's still pretty nebulous, right? We don't really, how do I start analyzing this? So let's talk a little bit about directed graphs. Scale it right back down to boring math stuff. But this is the idea, right? Anything that has both content and links, you can think of as a directed graph. It's a good way to visualize any network. Anytime you think of the word network, you can typically layer a graph over it. So the nodes of the graph are the content or the states that we care about, right? And the links in the graph are the transitions between those nodes. And also you might see these called other places vertices. So the node is the vertex, the corner, and the links are the edges. You may remember those from 3D geometry. Same thing, same content, same concept. So a polygon, a pentagon, for example, has 5 vertices and it has 5 edges. Graphs, directed graphs, are more complex than that typically, but in this case we see a little triangle here, right? It has 3 vertices, 3 nodes, and 3 edges, 3 links. So just keep that edge concept active. That if you come across these in the future, just remember edge. It makes sense. You just have to make this connection that edge is a link, right? So this is very general. I'm talking in like very general graph theory stuff, and this can be applied to all kinds of things. In fact, I'll tell you that a lot of like basic video game AI is just finite state automata, which in essence are directed graphs. The AI will swap between states depending on what's happening in the world. It will transition to a new state and do different things based on what state it's in. But that's just an example. Another example, a good example that I think can help tie this up and make it very concrete is a house. So, think about a house, right? You can hang out in a house. You probably live in something resembling a house, and what's going on in a house? A house is full of rooms. It has lots of space, and it has lots of areas that that you personally can occupy. But we can think of a house in terms of a directed graph. So let's walk through this particular floor plan here, right? We see that this is a 2-story house that it's got like a nice loft area above the bathroom and bedroom. So on the left-hand side, you see the bottom floor. Right-hand side, you see the top floor. Well, we can represent this as a network because we can talk about the rooms as states that we want to be in, the nodes, the pages, the content, right? And the edges, the links are the doors, the transitions, the things we use to move between rooms, right? So, for example, the porch, right? That's the first thing you come across at the house. Walk up on the porch. Hey, front porch. That's one of our states. What do we see? There's a doorway right there. Okay, so the front door we also can access, and that gives us access to the vaulted living room. Okay, so this spans both stories, right? This is a very tall living room. And from here we see several doors, right? Several transitions, rather, because we have one normal interior door going what looks like maybe to a bathroom, one going to a bedroom, one going up the stairs, okay? And then we can go into each of these and consider them an individual node, right? So a bathroom, the bedroom, and then the loft itself up there. Great. And then if we want to get real fancy, we can go even deeper and say, well, from the loft, it looks like there are 2 closets. Closet doors into closets. Okay. The point in doing this is to get you familiar with the idea that this is a perfectly usable understanding of the house, right? It doesn't have any of the information about the size of the rooms, where the couch is, where's the TV, but it represents pretty well the way that you interface with the house, the way that you interact with it, the way you can move through it, right? In terms of the meaningful states. If I want to get from the front porch to the upstairs closet, it's pretty clear I can determine that path using this directed graph, right? So where are we going with this? Well, this is just to give you a good visualization of this is how it works online, right? Nodes and links online are going to be, a node is any given web page, any given page of content, a web address, some place that you can be in your browser, a document in our world, right? And the links are anything that connects the pages to each other. Typically, our good old friend, the underlined blue text, the hyperlink, the anchor, that will take us to a different page, right? So now we can think about the entire World Wide Web as this interconnected set of locations, of spaces, of documents, things of interest, content that the user cares about, and then the ways that we move between them, the options to move between those contents. So this is the general way that we can, just hopefully this helps you conceptualize it a little better and realize that, these directed graphs are actually quite useful in terms of at least visualizing this mentally, but also they're useful because we can start doing some analysis stuff using them. So we want to make sense of these networks, right? If we're coming at this from the information retrieval world and we're trying to build a web crawler that does good things, right? We can make use of this structure to pin a few things down. So things like, how informative is a given page? How safe is a given page? We're not going to get all of these in perfect detail, but these are the kinds of questions we can start to probe once we consider where does a given page live in the interconnected network of what all is going on. So two techniques we'll talk about today are link analysis and PageRank. We'll start with link analysis. So link analysis is this approach that helps you identify, to classify good pages versus bad pages. So a good page on the internet is one that actually, attempts to have meaningful content, accurate content. It's going to use secure connections. It's not going to try to extract sensitive information unless it's like completely necessary from the user to use the page. Good pages are the things that we want to keep track of. Why do we need to think about bad pages? Well, because the internet is full of garbage, as you better well know at this point. But really, it's not just that things are garbage, it's that bad pages have all these features of that they're going to try to mislead, both in terms of like broad, get you to buy some kind of conspiracy kind of thing, but more needling stuff like it'll make you think that clicking this box will allow you to get a free, taco or whatever, and then it's going to steal your information, right? So they'll extend these pushy offers. They're going to feature false comments. They're going to be full of just junk, but kind of even worse is that they're going to link to each other too. A bad page is going to do everything it can to connect you to other bad pages. The idea of link analysis is trying to say that, okay, good pages and bad pages, they certainly seem to exist, even though it's a little bit reductive. They seem to exist, and we're going to try and use that as a filter, right? So just to give an example of good and bad, here's just a simple Good Housekeeping website, right? It's a page, or it's a site dedicated to, tips for your house, the products to buy, techniques to use, that kind of stuff. And we have two nearly identical pages here. One is chock full of garbage ads for, one weird trick, your doctors hate him, that kind of stuff. that are going to get you to click and go drag you into some place where someone can make free money off of you instead of give you the content that you were seeking, right? So the fake Good Housekeeping at the top doesn't have the right URL, for one thing, popular lifestylejournal.com. It seems to have an article about Dr. Oz. Yeah, that guy's a prick, just so you know. You can tell him I said that. And it's also full of just, it's not going to have the content that you wanted to give to your user, right? This would be the kind of page that we would not want to index because we can identify that, hey, first of all, it's masquerading as a different website. That's great. But it's just not quality, right? It's not going to meet the quality bar for something that we actually want to index in our system. Whereas the normal Good Housekeeping, whether you like this sort of corporatized housekeeping blog or not, it doesn't matter so much as they're actually trying to do the thing that they say they're trying to do, right? They're delivering articles on housekeeping, whereas the other one is giving a sort of a downward spiral into the click hole of the internet. So, although ClickHole is a great website, don't discard that. So this is the idea, right? We're trying to figure out which, and it's not coming down to like how do you personally identify these things. It's more about the fact that these two pages exist, and one of them is going to have a different link structure than the other one, right? It's going to link to different kinds of things than Good Housekeeping is going to link to. So let's talk about links, right? This is link analysis. Let's talk about the nature of a link. So an individual page, it might be fake or spammy or whatever. We just deal with that. We're humans living on Earth in the internet age. Like, that's just going to happen, right? The key thing here is where does this live in our network, right? More important than the fact that a crummy page exists and trying to avoid an individual page is that these pages live inside the network somewhere and they link to each other and other pages and perhaps good pages, bad pages, all this kind of stuff. So an important thought here is that a link to another page is a sort of tacit endorsement of that page. So if we can find bad pages, we can sort of start to infer which pages are good and bad based on whether or not they're whether or not they are endorsing one another, right? So, link analysis, the basic premise is this idea of guilty by association. Not great to apply in your personal life or legal life necessarily, but pretty good for determining crummy web pages from each other, right? So good pages, the premise is good pages will not point to bad pages, right? You're building your website, you're trying to do things in earnest, you're trying to do something useful, right? You're trying to provide something for a user. You're not going to point to Dr. Oz's fake housekeeping.blog, right? You're going to point to things that you actually think are useful and good. So bad pages don't have that filter, is the premise. Again, that there are ways that you can kind of skirt around. If you're a real bad actor, you can figure out all kinds of crazy ways to dodge these things. Of course you can. That's the nature of programming. But the idea here is that at a basic level, if I run a link analysis, I can assume a few things. So anyway, this is the first step is good pages won't point to bad pages. So if you do point to a bad page, you're bad. As in a given node that we're not sure about yet. And then also, if a good node points to you, you're probably good. This is sort of an uneven thing. You have to pull this out, right? If I happen to point to a bad node, I'm dunskies. If a good node points to me, then I'm probably good. Now, if a good node points to me and I'm pointing to a bad node, bad wins in this case. So your link analysis proceeds. You say, hey, I have a handful of pages I consider to be the good set. the basic set of things that I think are informative, useful, part of my search system, things that are going to be, relevant to my users. And then there's the bad set that you might have just a handful of pages that are predetermined. You've figured out, oh, geez, badhousekeeping.blog is bad. We're not going to tolerate that in our search system. So the way you can now build out this graph is you follow these rules, right? So the primary one to keep in mind is just that good pages won't point to bad pages. So let's sort it out. Here's a little network, right? We have 3 good pages and 2 bad pages. And we got to figure out what the 4 other pages are like. Remember that we don't care if a bad page points to us. Bad pages are going to point all over the place. We care if a good page points to us and whether or not we point to a bad page. So let's look at each one of these. We'll do 2 at a time just because I only have so many stages. But the top one, the very top one, okay, we're not sure what's going on with the one that points to it, right? So the top question mark, right? That one, it points to a good page, but it also points to a bad page. That's going to be a bad page. Something that's linking to a bad faith website is not going to be a great thing to include in our search, or in our collection that we're building, in our crawl. Whereas, okay, let's look at the leftmost question mark. That one, let's see, it's not pointing over at anything that's bad or good necessarily, but it is getting pointed to by 2 good pages. We can consider that one a good page. We've knocked out 2 of them. Now we can sort out the last couple here. So the one on the right, even though, let's see, yes, the rightmost question mark is pointing at 2 bad pages, yikes, but it's also pointing at a good page. But remember, we don't care. Bad pages are going to point to good pages. It's only the good pages that we want to eliminate that are going to point to the bad ones. Bottom one then, it's getting pointed to by several things, but the only thing it actually points to is a good page. Rather, sorry, invert that. It's pointing to a good page on the left. It's being pointed to by a bad page on the right. That's not enough information. The only thing that we can solve this on is, oh shoot, the good page above it is pointing to it. Good. So we can now call this one good. This is absolutely not perfect, right? But it's a way of sort of taking a set of pages that we know are crummy, bad, bad faith websites, and a few that we think of as good for our system, good for our search system, and sort of propagating them out to other pages in our network. So this helps us to make a first pass at filtering this down. So the whole idea is we're trying to weed out spammers, malicious sites that try to steal your info, that kind of stuff, because we don't want these to be included in our search, unless we're making a search site based for exclusively bad acting websites, which actually sounds kind of fun. But generally, like I said before, guilt by association is pretty coarse, pretty simplistic view of morality, but it does a good job in this automated process, right? And it's more or less, it's easy to correct too. If your page is trying to act in good faith, but it turns out you've pointed to what has become a bad faith actor, been flagged as that, you can just get a warning, right? You can just take that link down. You can change it. This isn't destructive to a page that winds up being considered bad, because good pages are going to try to act in good faith, right? So this is the idea of link analysis. I hope it makes sense. It's like you're helping to figure out the nature of a lot of the pages in your big set, in your big data set, your big network, and saying which ones of these are trying to steal my credit card and which ones are actually trying to give me good housekeeping tips, right? So now one thing that comes up here is how do I identify those bad pages to start, right? And there's several options out there for this kind of thing. I mean, some of it can just be manual. You can say, oh, I know these ones are bad, or you can check a database of bad pages somewhere or another. But there's a few things that we have in our toolkit that can actually help with this to kind of automate. So first of all, there's the idea that the page might be violating some sort of basic laws of natural language. That's kind of interesting. There's also there are tools out there that you can install and use to as you're browsing, kind of like similar to ad blockers that can help you identify things that other users have flagged in aggregate as good, bad, ugly, that kind of stuff. And then also we can use this sort of we can bake in our own definition of bad in terms of just relevance to the topic that our search system is being built for. So we can kind of hijack this link analysis method, and instead of saying like I'm trying to avoid bad faith websites, say I'm trying to avoid off-topic websites. We can kind of reuse it. So how can we do these things? Well, the first one is Zipf's law. This is just an example. Zipf's law for natural language is sort of just a statistical thing. So natural language, right? The language we speak, the language we write, the language that we use in our everyday thing, in this sort of, especially in this unstructured data world, right? Even though it's unstructured in the broad sense, it still follows certain rules. And maybe a better way to put that is, we as researchers have scientifically uncovered regularities in that natural language mess, right? So Zipf's law is a nice little law. It's this straightforward equation to figure out if words are appearing on a page with this, unnatural frequency. So pages that deviate heavily from the predicted natural frequency of language, we're going to say, hey, that's pretty suspicious. So an example of Zipf's law is the most frequent words are going to be much more frequent than the lesser frequent words. And here we see the is obviously the far most frequent in this particular database, and of, a, to, in, that, this, that kind of stuff. So if you saw somewhere past the 20th rank, the word housekeeping or something is up in the 10,000s instead of down where it belongs in the less than 1,000s, then that's weird, right? That's not even just like a hub page. That's like a broken, kind of insane amount of usage of the term. It might signify that this page is trying to sort of bump up its search engine presence by over abusing a word, which we should remember, TF-IDF, yeah, the more times I use an infrequent word in my search system, the more I'm going to be represented if they're using TF-IDF. So that's the idea. You can use these sort of back-end checks to say, hey, is this page following anything remotely natural, or is it almost certainly garbage made up by an algorithm to try to maximize its web presence? So that's one tool in our kit. Another tool in our kit is these sort of trust tools, these plugins. These can be things that you use in your personal life, but also you can interface with their APIs to do things like you can check in these moderated third-party tools. So user moderated, right? So a given web page, users can rate it based on big categories like trustworthiness, relevance, safety. Is this page trying to run a spam script under the hood? You don't have to be in charge of knowing that yourself. You can rely on a sort of wisdom of the masses, right? This is not perfect either. User data is always a strange beast, but it's an option, right? It's a way that we could say, oh, any page that's rating, under 1.0 on or like 2.0 on all of these things, we're going to go ahead and label them bad so we can start our link analysis. Also, a deep irony I discovered while I was preparing this was that the old fan favorite Web of Trust, a browser plugin that you could use that would help identify these kinds of things, was itself discovered to be extracting user data and doing sort of malicious under the hood things. So be careful who you trust sometimes. Woof. Yeah. So on top of these sort of users, or even perhaps user is less important than curated, right? Maybe Norton Antivirus is curating its own set of pages and rating them for different things, whatever. So just the fact that there's this information available out there that you can use to help, assign things to your web search, right? So also, we talked about briefly here, the using this sort of link analysis technique to set a scope for your system, right? You could say all of these topics are off base, right? If you're trying to set up a web search system about baseball articles for a particular team or something, right? You might want to throw out all the articles that are not about baseball, for example. You might not throw out all the articles that are about a different team, but you might want to throw out things that are about soccer, right? So you would have, you could list soccer pages for your particular web crawl, list them as negative, as bad actors, quote, so to speak, and thus that would make it so that when you do a link analysis to figure out which pages you want to care about and not, anything that's kind of connected to all these soccer pages will get thrown out. Again, it can be, this is a sort of ballistic process. You're going to have to just set it and go with it. So you would need to tweak these things. But this is good. I think this is like a way that you can reuse this same, safety-based link analysis to change the scope of your system or help sort of naturally limit the scope of how your system is harvesting pages from the internet. Your web crawler, more or less, right? So this is how link analysis works and how you can sort of use it and how we can get started with identifying bad pages. So yeah, you can use it to guide your web crawling, right? You can say, hey, don't use these bad links. You can use it to help limit your scope. And but this has been mostly, so not about ranking, right? This is one cool way that we can use the interconnected network structure of the internet to help us filter what pages are good and bad. It's sort of just focusing on the structure, right? But if we want to actually rank things using this structure, we need to give something that is not just a binary, these pages are bad, these pages are good, because again, hey, that's Boolean, right? That's Boolean search, it's a filter. We want a value, right? So this is where we enter PageRank. Also, I kind of hate this image. It's kind of unsettling to me, but I couldn't avoid throwing it in there. What is PageRank? PageRank is this sort of interconnectedness rating. It's still considering a link from one page to another to be kind of an endorsement of that page. It's still kind of following that idea, but this is less about hard, filtering on good and bad, and more about comprehending how connected is this page to other pages. And it helps because, a lot of pages linking to your page is a lot of pages endorsing your page. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good actor, but it does mean that you have a lot of endorsements, right? So that's the core idea of PageRank. Now, how do we calculate PageRank? At the broadest level, we can think of PageRank as keeping track of the frequency of visits in your network during a random walk. So what's a random walk? So given a starting node in one of these graphs, right, or potentially even just a random one, you have the system then pick a randomly chosen link and move to a new node, right? So it has to be a link connected to the node that you're starting from, but the idea being you just randomly walk all over the network, right? So PageRank score for a given page will scale with how often that node is visited during the random walk. And you kind of can get the idea here that a page that has a lot of links to it is going to get visited a lot more often, whereas a page that has almost no links to it is going to get visited very infrequently, right? So we see on the left side here, we have the pages I, H, L, M, and G. They don't even have anything linking to them, so they're going to have very low scores. But then we look at something like E, it has a very high score because it has lots of pages linking to it, so that the random walk will bring things back to it over and over. This is pretty simple, but this is a way that we can. This is a really useful way of taking the structure of the network that exists, right? You know, we might have 10 pages or 10,000, but they have a link structure between the pages, right? And we can boil it down into a number for each page. So even though on a given page you might not know straight away, well, how well connected is this page, you can run this simulation and do it. So it's a programmatic analysis. Let's look at some examples and just kind of noodle out what we think the page ranks will look like on them. So here's basic page setup, right? We have A seems to be a pretty important page here, and the other three pages, B, C, and D, are all pointing to just it, right? They're not interconnected to other things, they just point back to it. So I think pretty clearly, A is going to have a really high page rank, while B, C, and D will have a pretty low one, right? Let's add some more links. Okay, so now B and D are both pointing to A and C both point to each other. Ooh, so this would shift the balance, right? In this network, now both A and C are going to have pretty high page rank scores, and B and D will both still be kind of low, right? Let's add more links. Ooh, now all of the pages all point at each other. Well, this, I think we're going to have equal page rank on all of these, right? This is not an especially informative network, but that's fine. This is just the nature of networks that have these interconnected values. So all the pages all pointing at each other makes page rank irrelevant, but they also, you know, compared to other pages that might not be pointing at each other, this is a good, you know, this is a highly connected network. So they would be equal. How about this one? Kind of stripped off a bunch of them at random. Oof. This isn't not as straightforward, but I think this is probably a little more realistic in terms of the way pages all link to each other online, right? B is pointing to C, A points to D, C does point over to A, and then C and D point to each other. I think we'll probably agree that B is the lowest. The fact that C and D do point to each other is kind of, you know, that's going to let them walk back and forth between each other quite well. But sometimes C kind of goes over to A and creates this little loop. So A might be a little bit higher than B, but so B, A, and then C and D are probably pretty close. We wouldn't really know. This is where you start to need the algorithm to handle this for you, right? It's not straightforward to consider all these possibilities. So that's the idea. So you can see, here's a little GIF of a page rank taking shape. It's not playing just yet. This is the network, right? Again, wouldn't be clear how you would page rank this, right? We don't have an initial guess at this. We might think, you know, clearly the ones that are more connected will end up with a higher page rank, but there's some sort of dynamic interactions that can happen here. So we'll just watch it go. It kind of iterates back and forth. We see different random walks will happen, kind of adding more and more to the sum, and we start to see the darker nodes are the ones that are more active, right? And it reset. I don't think I can stop it. It's fine. But I hope you're getting the idea, right? These nodes all end up, by doing the random walk algorithm, you sort of settle on something that seems realistic, right? So that's the idea of PageRank, right? We are trying to get at a given page's connectedness, right? So the implication here is that a well-connected page is likely to have some kind of authority, right? If everything's pointing at the New York Times, and Twitter's 10 trillion tweets are all saying, "Hey, look at this article," you would think, okay, well, that probably has some kind of authority, right? There's something about this article that and this website that are a little more reputable than Joe's Crazy Shack blog, So that's not to, everyone's allowed to have their own website, of course, but the idea is that PageRank, the more things that sort of point at each other, the more we think of, okay, these are being pointed at for a reason, right? Hub pages, we've talked about briefly before, they're going to be super well connected. And so then therefore are the best pages, the things that more people will link to. So, you might not even have a hub page, or let's see, it might be better to think of a hub page will point to many things, and in turn, many things will point to a hub page because it points to many things. But then individual pages will also not necessarily point to a lot of things, but will be pointed to by many things, right? You may have shared articles lately, right? Every time you share an article, that's in a way creating a link to that article, and the more those go around, the more they have a sort of authority associated with them. So this is just to give you the idea of why PageRank has been the key in recent memory. Although I would suggest that there might be some flaws in this thinking. Just because things are connected doesn't make them good. So, important thoughts. Here is the supplementary text for this course. It's on the website, right? I've shown you before. Again, don't remember. It's not required reading, but it's a good desk reference. I'll keep endorsing it for that. So this is a hub page, right? And it points to all the other pages of the textbook. And this makes it a good source, right? It's going to have a high page rank compared to an individual page of this textbook. So in essence, you would maybe take this and say, oh, right, if somebody's searching for the information retrieval textbook, I should probably give them the hub page. And that's how PageRank can help in the search ranking, right? You say, oh, well, hub pages and or just really good, well-connected articles or individual pages, we'll push those up to the top because they seem to be the things that people want the most, right? So that's how we're using links to rank. A very clean example of this general idea is in a lot of academic work, scholarly articles. You can estimate an author's quality of their research. Hesitate to say that, but in a sense, how often is this author cited, right? How often are their works cited? How often are they published, right? So this relatedness idea. It's sort of this third-party confirmation, right? I can link to whoever I want, but if 10 of my friends are linking to it, that means one thing. And if 10 other strangers are linking to it, yet again, another thing that is an endorsement of this individual page, person, whatever content we're talking about. But that's nice and clean because these are all like curated collections of articles that must go through a process to be considered cited and citable, all that kind of thing. We can also swing to the complete opposite end of the spectrum because, as we all know, the web ain't clean. So as soon as hyperlinks were born, so was spam. That's just kind of, I guess, who we are as a species. That's fun. So weighing frequency and connectedness isn't going to give us all of the things that we want here for relevance of search because link farms exist. Link farms are they're not any actual real content. They're just a boatload of garbage that all link to things. So, for example, this is the text of a link farm page. You might have bumped into these in your searches in your life, right? It's like an automated snip of some other description of some product that, oops, this is going to get searched. This is going to get indexed by Google. It's going to say, this is Leslie Pool Supplies, and also energy drinks, and also heavy metal art, and also machinery and bed comfort. It's going to get connected mostly automatically. A normal human would not connect to these things, but it's going to get accidentally connected in a lot of ways that's going to turn it into a powerful hub. Except, oops, that sucks, because that doesn't give us an actual... This is artificially inflating the page rank of another page. And more insidious is that even though all of these pages all of these links exist, the text of those links might not actually map up. They might all point to a garbage spam page that, again, trying to get your credit card information or whatever. So just because it says Leslie's Pool Supplies there at the top doesn't mean that link is actually going to go to the right place. And in fact, if you think about the network structure, a spam page with a boatload of links from a link farm is going to look pretty appealing in terms of its page rank. Lots of bad links from a junk page are pointing at me, the happy spam page, whereas a normal web page is going to have, only a handful of links from various places all over the internet. So that's kind of the general idea of how a link farm skirts this, right? And this is just to hammer the point home. Any algorithm that you've learned about in this class, especially in the the internet search engine optimization stuff, there are people trying to exploit it and sort of figure out the minimum effort way to make it rise to the top. So it's an ongoing struggle, right? Google is always trying to come up with better ways to say, geez, that's a stupid idea. How do we fix it? And that's what the next question is. How do we fix it? So how do we avoid spam when we're building our page rank, when we're calculating our page rank scores, right? The link farms exist. Once again, just accept it, move forward. Link farms are there. So how do you avoid indexing and including and allowing a link farm to artificially inflate a junk web page in your system, in your results? So there's two methods. These are both employed by Google, which are quite useful. So we can talk about the anchor text and user data. So these are kind of two. This is more the user centered, or the web page centered approach. So if we think about the anchor text in a link, right? Hyperlinks will link you somewhere. The anchor text itself, though, is what's displayed, right? So this is how any internet trolling, the good old-fashioned Rickrolls of the world work, right? It's you think it's going to link to something, but it turns out it links to something else. Internet meme historian here. Cheers. So the idea of how we can use this information, hey, this is a good old-fashioned it's almost like a field, right? It's its own little chunk of unstructured data. We can do an analysis that says, is this anchor text actually related to the content of the page that it links to? Hey, that's a nice little filter. That's a handy little filter, because any web page that actually creates a link, it's trying to intentionally communicate something to you, right? So not only is the link itself some kind of endorsement, right? We think of, I'm going to link you to this thing, and that means my page endorses it. It also carries with it this specific claim, this communication about what that link is for, right? In some web pages, some like articles will use this kind of creatively. They'll finish a sentence and the back half of the sentence is all a link to another article or page or something. But the idea is that we can treat the anchor text as this powerful little intentional communication bit. So you can analyze it to figure out, is this link actually being used properly? And also you can look at all of the links that point to a given website and see, is their anchor text actually, does it agree with my website, and do they agree with each other about what this page is? it's a cool little, feature of things we've already discussed. I love this approach. It's a nice way to sort of, extract this intentional information, this intentional communication that people probably don't even think about using, right? You don't really think of your anchor text as this like critical piece of evidence about whether you actually mean it, right? But there it is. It kind of is. So love that kind of stuff. Right. So the idea that we can use anchor text to figure out, is the site actually genuine? Another useful tool in the kit is that we can just use, are people actually clicking these links, right? So PageRank provides this expected rate of visiting the site, right? On a random walk, an accidental stumbling through the internet, how likely am I to hit this website? Compared to the actual rate of clicks, which something like Google can keep track of course, how many people have used this link. So that's great. So that means that we can see sites that are actually exceeding their PageRank expectations will get rewarded, right? Because they are, oh shoot, this not only is this like this page might be more useful than PageRank claims it is, so we'll go to it. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, oh, PageRank claims this page should be this useful, but absolutely no one is clicking on it, we'll lower it down, right? So user data, user clicks can be incorporated into your PageRank analysis. So that's it. To tie it up, the idea, the fun stuff here is that we're able to look at and make sense of the interconnected structure of the links around a page to help us understand that page's relevance, both in a broad sense, but also in sort of a, in terms of our own search's relevance, not so much, but in terms of its relevance in general, right? This is a sort of an objective relevance of what are other pages doing regarding this page. So a hub page and a good page hopefully have lots of links to them, right? But at the end of the day, so do link farms. So we can help to kind of pull this apart using user info, anchor text analysis, all this good stuff. So that's it. This is sort of to wrap up how we think about how you can think about the interconnected nature of web pages to guide your crawling, but also to give you a good sense of, is this page worth kind of propping up to the top of my search results for my user, right? And you could do this based on its global page rank, or you could calculate your own page rank within your small subset of information, whatever you're using, whatever you're building your search system to search. So that's it. Now, final thought. In recent memory, it seems clusters of disreputable information sources are becoming increasingly interconnected with our normal online flow, casting a bit of doubt on PageRank's concept that interconnected means reputable. Can you think of a way that this has affected you or someone you know? Is there a decent alternative? All right. Thanks. Take care.